Good morning from the UK and welcome to our 24-hour Global Changing Risk Day. My name is Kinley. I'm Content Director for Strategic Risk and I'll be moderating our webinars in this part of the world. You've heard from my colleagues across Asia Pacific, and our webinar series will now work its way around Europe with speakers from across the continent sharing their knowledge and insight over the next 8 hours. I'm very pleased to introduce our very first speaker for the day, presenting from France. Adrian Clements is an international and independent ERM consultant and has held senior roles at ArcelorMittal and Tereos. His presentation will be focused on rethinking risk objectives for the C-suite. Before I hand over to Adrian, a short housekeeping announcement. As with the presentations you may have heard from Asia Pacific, this is very much an interactive session, and we encourage you to ask our speakers as many questions as you so desire. You can do this by clicking on the Q&A box, which you'll find on your Zoom toolbar, and I'll pose these questions at the end of the presentation. Our sessions will generally run for 40 minutes on the hour, every hour, with a short 20-minute break between each presentation at about 40 minutes past the hour. During these breaks, you will be able to hear us because we will be loading up the next presentation. So if you're online, please bear with us. And with that, I now hand over to Adrian Clements, who will share his screen and run us through his presentation.
So, hello, everybody. Good morning. Kim, can you hear me?
I can.
Can you see my screen?
No, not just yet.
No. Ooh, build a fragment.
So if we go to share.
There we go. You should be able to see it now, I think.
Excellent.
Excellent. That's a good sign. So good morning, everybody. I'll start again. It's a real honor to be invited to join this first global 24-hour risk management discussion and conference, I guess. So first, I'd like to make one thing very clear. I think a little bit differently to most people, and some people might say I'm a little crazy, a little stupid, but I've been doing this job for 30 years. And I've seen many things, many different companies, many different industries, sectors across the whole globe. And I've seen almost everything, I think. And therefore, there is certainly not one solution that fits every problem. But what I've seen many times over the last few years is that many people, the C-suite and the risk managers are trying many times to put square pegs in round holes. And I would just like everyone to throw away their preconceived ideas and what it says in all of the documents, the COSO and ISO, and step back and think, is this really what we need to do? So you see there, I put the word fellowship on the slide. This came from a forum which I attended just a couple of weeks ago. And it's the first time I've heard the word fellowship in terms of risk management. And I think it's a very strong, powerful word. I'll come to that a little bit later on. But please, we are not only partnering and supporting and helping and advising, but what is key is transparency and communication. So, and that's where the word fellowship maybe encompasses that as well. So just for some insight into that. So the first thing, there's been some surveys done on the, and you can see that on the internet and many other media platforms. What does the C-suite actually want? What's keeping the CEO awake? And I've summarized them very generically here, but the right scale, the right strategy, to be different, to align and to prioritize. That's a very interesting one because even some of the biggest companies in the world have massive problems prioritizing their actions, their decisions, their investments, etc. And the fourth one, keeping talent. This will get more and more important as time goes on, and the volatility we see today in the world is becoming a key player, a key area of concern. But overall, if I can look at some key, let's say, call them KPIs, most people use EBITDA as their KPI to identify if they are going with the right strategy, if they are differentiating themselves, etc. Cost efficiency, you see many times being used out there today. Certainly in the last 5 years or 10 years, you've been seeing stakeholder value as opposed to shareholder value coming along. And we have this conflict many times between short and long-term strategies and visions. So if that's painting, what I tried to do here is to show, paint a little bit of the picture, what's driving the C-suite in many countries, many companies, many cultures. I don't say it is right or wrong. I just say that's what many surveys are saying. But I honestly don't like the word risk in risk management. I prefer the word opportunity. And therefore, what I want to do in the course of this short presentation is to just use opportunity as the key driver. The first, so summarize or putting contents into this presentation. I want to give a short overview of the fact that opportunities are outpacing risks. Risk managers need to look into the future and advise and support, create this fellowship with the C-suite. I would like to see that financial reporting is enabler, as an enabler. I think we've branded risk management wrongly, and I think that needs to be changed in the future. And I believe we need a system, not a process. And then summarizing in the last 2 slides, I will try to give my view, which is again crazy and different, on what does the long term actually mean. And I've put a few things there, matter transportation, magnetic flip, Carrington effect. Maybe some of you have never even heard of those things. The Carrington effect, we were lucky in 2012. We missed that by 9 days. That is where the electromagnetic wave hits the Earth from the sun. There's a solar flare, and we lose a lot of our communication networks in the whole world because the electronic chips have been fried. This is a risk. It's not emerging. It's there. It's known. Magnetic flip, where the Earth's magnetic field flips over. So north becomes south, south becomes north. Is there. It'll cause chaos with your cars and your navigation systems. But it's there. It's nothing unusual. But these are facts, not risks. And I'll come to that later. So first, I believe this maybe have already been discussed earlier this morning in one of the other presentations, but opportunity is getting bigger and bigger. We all know that the 4th industrial revolution is coming. Based upon the last 3, there's a 100-year gap between them. So 2070 is an estimate of when it might occur. But what I try to show in this chart actually is the increasing opportunity that we have because of this revolution. You will have companies who are doing the commodity business, of course. But as we all know, if you stand still, you go backwards. So therefore, it is important to, in my opinion, to advise or to support the C-suite in understanding that this gap is there, this level of uncertainty is increasing. The velocity, not time, but the velocity of risks is increasing. And therefore the window of opportunity is very tight. So we have to be agile, we have to be dynamic. And I think we're going to see a tremendous change in the way industry is operating in the future. We will not see 100, 200-year-old companies making the same thing again and again, we will see tremendous volatility, transparency, variety and change coming, which will cause a lot of social issues, a lot of complexity, and I'm not too sure that the C-suite are aware of that. It's not an emerging risk at all, in my opinion. It's clearly there, and we can hope. My idea of risk management in the future is to help the advise the C-suite. But not only the C-suite, I will come to that also. I'm not sure that the C-suite is our only customer. I believe we have another customer who is actually more important. But again, I'll come to that in a few slides. So the first thing that is clear is that if you have an increasing gap between where we are and where we need to be, then our appetite, our tolerance has to be dynamic. Otherwise, if we don't take risk, as we all know, we lose opportunity. So if I look at simply this growing cone of opportunity, then we need a system which enables us to move forwards, which means we need to leverage our tolerance and our appetite. And depending on the way the company is evolving and the way the C-suite are making their decisions, we can actually move into other business areas, other sectors. And we saw that with Nokia, going from rubber boots through to telephones and internet. And we also saw that with Peugeot, going from bicycles, cars, even clothes, and now they make cars. In order to do that, in order to be that flexible, that agile, you need a understanding of the three-dimensional view or world of risk tolerance and risk appetite. It's not two-dimensional, as many people believe, or as it's documented in the paperwork that we read and we follow diligently. It has to be three-dimensional. And you can see on the top of that cone, there are the, let's say, some risk universe categories. And I can increase or lower my financial risk, for example, by taking more or less operational risk or social risk or economic risk, for example. So I think first we need to adapt our control systems, our governance, which means that internal audit, internal revision need to be flexible to enable us to be able to overstep our normal appetite and tolerance for short periods of time, which will enable us to take those opportunities that we need to be able to take us into the future. So this, I think everyone, most people do this as normal. They start from where they are. Most C-suite start with last year's results and try to move forwards. I believe we have a problem with this. I believe that we miss a lot of opportunities by doing that. In this chart, I very simply want to show how I, in the past, have been giving advice to boards, to C-suite members of companies I've worked for. And I do it again from an operational viewpoint, a very basic, down-to-earth operational standpoint. We all know we have a budget. We all know that we have annual investments. We all know that when we make those investments, the production or the operational performance increases. But then you have a slow decrease over time. The chart is, of course, exaggerated, but at some point you call some management consultants to help you out. And you can see that if we invest a little bit more, if we increase our maintenance budgets, if we increase our spend, maybe we can stay in that area of optimal, that optimized business case based upon where we were in the past, where the operations that we currently do can take us into the future. And of course, that cone is indicating the normal spectrum of achieving the goals or not, so best optimized business case. However, if I start from the other direction, where do I need to be in 10 years' time to be successful? And then I look back at where do I need to invest? What spend do I need to give? Which assets do I need to maintain? You get a slightly different picture. And this is this ties in very nicely with the appetite model I just showed. It means that we need to have a very strong discussion with the C-suite to understand what does the future look like. We are risk managers after all, we are looking into the future. What does that look like? What's the business case that you need to have in the future? And where are we today? This should change the way we act, the way the board directors are making their decisions, and should actually take us forwards faster. Interesting, if you look at the item C, or area C on that chart, you will see that that green line actually indicates, in the companies I've worked for, it's indicated a 3% increase in productivity per year. If you did not have a 3% increase in productivity per year, you were standing still or going backwards. Your assets became obsolete. So, and as you can see in the red line, these assets are being harvested. They are basically being run into the ground in very plain English, and will not be fit for purpose in the future. Cost cutting, which many people are doing. You see that many times. Management companies, management consultants are asking you to cut cost. This will actually cause in the future some issues. So yes, it's short term, maybe is interesting, but long term, we can have some issues with that. As I hope that chart, or I'm hoping that chart tries to give that idea. So advising the C-suite. What's also key here is the use of artificial intelligence. I give a very simple example. If you take the space agencies, NASA, European Space Agency, etc., and you plan to go to Mars, which is the next big step, then of course you will have issues that you've never had before. If you take experts and experts look at what has happened in the past, then you will come to a conclusion at some point that, okay, I will ignore this one possibility because it's unlikely. However, if you use artificial intelligence, you have to use all the data. And by using all the data, you eliminate the expert bias, which can come into decision making. And you might actually have a good result or an interesting conclusion from using this data. I'll give a very good example. I had in one of my previous companies 15 years of data from some machinery. This machinery had, of course, changed over time. We had new machines, new models, new manufacturers. The parts had been changed, and so we assumed that the information we had in the databases was incorrect, was not clean, and so we tried to normalize the data. This actually, from an artificial intelligence viewpoint, is wrong, because we were adding bias to that data. We needed to have all the data, all 15 years data from a global company, and then artificial intelligence came up with some very, very interesting answers. So, and this can take us to where we need to be in the future, this type of decision making. What is interesting from a financial viewpoint is I tried and I have succeeded in a couple of companies to take the CFO and transform him from a reporter upwards to an advisor downwards. This means using industrial controlling in maybe a non-typical way, and just using the same information but in a different manner. You will see through this chart it can give some very interesting results. So here you see a normal EBITDA bridge. I'm sure that all of you have EBITDA bridges. One of the companies I work for had 18 standard bridges, which is crazy, but okay. And here you can see a normal EBITDA bridge growth from one year to the next. Fixed costs are negative, exchange rate is negative. So using this bridge as an example, I might conclude as a risk manager that we need to buy a hedge for exchange rate, for example. And of course, operations need to reduce their or to do something with their fixed cost. However, as we are creating value by doing many investments, many projects, the industrial controller can carve out that what we call value plan, that value creation idea. And you can see in this example, this is actually a real example from a real plant. They actually had $155 million of value creation in that 12-month period. But you can see the fixed costs were terrible. So some of the value creation was actually in reducing fixed costs, so that's good. And the volume mix, because we have different products with different tonnages and different values, you have a volume volatility or variation, but again, exchange rate. So buy a hedge would be, again, the conclusion. What we did using, again, the industrial controllers, we converted this bridge into a managerial bridge. In the first bridge at the top, the CFO might be the risk owner and be buying a hedge, as I just mentioned. In the bottom bridge, which is exactly the same numbers, same figures, just done in a slightly different way, we can see that the value creation is still the same, 155 million, but you can see we've had incidents. Every asset in the whole world will have some incidents, some events be stopping, whether it's on a daily rate, daily basis, and it's a few dollars, or a massive explosion where the insurance companies get involved. But you can see that now the CFO and the controller can advise the operations people where to spend the money, and they will give the funding. This is what actually happened. The funding was given to reduce those losses. The usage was improved. Fixed cost wasn't actually an issue. But I now report back to the board, back to the C-suite, a completely different picture. I don't have to buy the hedge. Unless it makes sense. It can also make sense, but what we see here is that spend is maybe more effective by reducing that what we call leakage, that operational leakage. And it's very important to understand where am I leaking EBITDA, where am I leaking funds, because that will help me increase my performance to reach that 3%, which I discussed earlier. So, who is our customer? I did a study a few years ago, a business canvas model on risk management. And a business canvas model, if for those that know, it's a very interesting tool. It gives a lot of transparency. For those that don't know, you really analyze your key partnerships, your key activities, resources, the channels of communication, customer relationships. You also capture in the updated version of the Canvas model the social and economic and environmental climate issues. But you really challenge, if you do it astutely and in depth, you really challenge risk management and who your key partners are, who your key channels are. So just to choose three, the board of directors is one customer. and they are, of course, looking and supporting the stakeholders. We have the management team who are looking to help and to support the shareholders, again, speaking very generically, and the operations who are keeping the operations running. Board of directors. I will challenge the board of directors today. The word directing or director means to direct. It means to provide a vision. I'm starting to see, and I heard very recently from a big pharmaceutical company, that their directors, when they saw the risk mapping that was given, they said, where are the future risks? It's the first time I've heard that. And most board of directors, as far as I'm aware, but I don't know all of them worldwide, don't really challenge or provide a vision of the future, not the future of the company, but the future of the world. And they don't give a very strong indication of the velocity and timeliness that they need. It's only through the board of directors giving that and their job of directing, providing that vision, which enables the management team to provide a strategy over the short term, which then can align with that more longer term vision that the board of directors and the stakeholders are doing. I believe one reason why we have some issues today with the idea of environment and these type of things, investments, is because the short-term view, the shareholder view, assumed that these were costs. And of course, the stakeholders are looking for long-term sustainability. Operations are providing the solutions to achieve these future goals and giving insight into roadblocks, some operational issues, etc. Again, from a very industrial viewpoint. So if I look at this from this viewpoint, then as a risk manager, I have different deliverables to these companies. That means that if I look at a normal value driver tree for a company, EBITDA, which is one of the goals, as I mentioned at the beginning of the management, the C-suite, is not taking into effect all of the economic, social, political, environmental issues that we have. And the KPI for measuring a company's strength and its viability is the enterprise value. And this means that if I take a normal statement that the management are, or the risk manager is supporting management to achieve the strategic goals of the company, I have to change that statement to say, if my board, if the directors are my customer, then they are helping achieve the strategic goals of civilization. This is a different view. It also means that the way I report my risks, most people have an issue with the idea of a heat map. A small plant, a very immature plant somewhere in the world can maybe still use that traditional heat map, except using vulnerability, agility, volatility, can be aligned with a different heat map, a different way of reporting risks, which is the the fishbone model at the top of the graph there. So ultimately, what I'm saying is we need a system. And here you see the system that I've been using for the last 7 or 8 years. Here you see the board of directors. So number one is the board of directors management, making strategic visionary discussions, the brainstorming sessions of the board, going through the projects, but then we value those projects based upon actual market value and like you saw from the EBITDA bridge, a managerial EBITDA bridge. And then we have the ability to say some projects are no longer viable. Okay, so this is a continuously flowing chart and can go at any speed you like. And this model, this system works very well. And I believe that this sort of approach can be very useful for the C-suite to understand what's going on and to create this fellowship, because we have the operations, we have the board, we have the controllers, we have the finance, we have all of the people involved in creating that system. So very quickly, just to finalize or to finish, the future. A lot of people are still using these four ideas of risk categories: technical, commercial, operational, financial. Compliance, operational, you can take a look at the internet, you find hundreds of different versions, but there's basically four. This is their risk universe, but it's very company centric, in my opinion. We need to change. If I look today, we are seeing, and I just look at the news this morning, we are seeing civilization being an issue, we're seeing health being an issue, we're seeing humanity, social issues, energy issues, transport issues. Yeah, a lot of electric car discussions taking place today. Art. I was challenged about a month ago about art has nothing to do with risk management. However, if I want to move forwards, and I won't go into many of these, I'll just go into the first one, which is health, which means the C-suites need to understand if I'm eliminating diseases and we are getting older and older, we will have tremendous social issues coming soon. Older people, we have to work until maybe we're 100 years old, maybe we won't die. This will cause tremendous issues that we need to look at, and the opportunities coming out of this are very, very interesting. The last point I would like to talk about is the art idea. Many of you maybe don't know, but Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction writer, invented the idea of the satellite. So this is a great opportunity. And Jules Verne, the developer of the Sikorsky helicopter, he got his inspiration from Jules Verne. Submarines, rockets also came from Jules Verne. So if you want to look at opportunity, if you want to be crazy, then we need this art view, because this is giving us the imagination, the inspiration to be able to create solutions or create the opportunities which will be solutions for the future. We need to capture those ideas. There's just a couple of points there, but don't underestimate the idea of the imagination, which is implying that risk management is an art as opposed to only a science. So thank you very much. I hope that has woken the people in Europe up a little bit. So I believe, Kim, we're ready for Q&A.
Yes, Adrian, thank you so much for such a thought-provoking presentation. And I can certainly say from my part that I am most certainly wide awake after your presentation. So thank you. We do have quite a few questions here. One relating to COSO and ISO, which you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, where you shared your views of the standards, and I'll just paraphrase this, as being not so effective. So if COSO and standards are being used by risk managers, and they have been for many years, as a guideline to develop their internal risk frameworks, and as a way to compare their risk management processes, and if there are challenges or issues with the standards, then that will likely cascade down to an organization's individual framework. So how do these standards contribute to some of the challenges that risk managers face? For example, the perception that their role prevents business development, etc.
Please don't misunderstand. There's a very strong need to have a framework and a guideline, and COSO and ISO should be used in that way as a guideline. Again, I was told last week, 2 weeks ago, I'm a board member of the Ermin Forum. A couple of the attendees there were discussing very clearly about the inconsistencies in ISO, for example, and the inconsistencies between COSO, ISO, PREMBOK, so the project management guideline on risk management or the risk management of projects. and that's why I mean by we need to brand ourselves more strongly. There needs to be consistency across the different documents that we have, whether it's financial documents, project documents, COSO, ISO. As a guideline, it is very good. I've heard. I tried to think which country it was. I think it was Italy, where some auditors are using it as a as their benchmark, and if you are not compliant, then they give you they downgrade you. So and this was never the intention of those guidelines, but some companies, some auditing companies, are using them as not as guidelines. What I would say is that we need to look into the future. We need to walk the talk. Yeah, we are risk managers. We have been preaching for a long time about looking into the future. What does the future look like, etc., etc. Certainly, when I was challenging ISO, and we wrote a number of pages back to the committee to get it changed, a lot of those necessary, well, in my opinion, necessary changes were not embedded into the those standards, those guidelines. Sorry. We need them, but they need to be really checked and made viable for the next 10 years. I don't think just the fact that we have a two-dimensional appetite idea coming from the Institute of Risk Management, for example, it's are they really fit for purpose? I will challenge that quite strongly. 99% of people will say yes because they use them on a daily basis and they base their entire strategy on them. I've always, for the last 15 years, 20 years, followed them as I felt fit. I'm sure that some of the bigger companies in the world just also are aware of them, use them, read them, but don't follow them black and white.
Great, excellent. Adrian, we do have another question on standards. So let me ask this as a follow-up. Your presentation was very much focused on how best to communicate with the C-suite and engage them on, you know, strategic related issues. So how much weight do the standards give to areas such as engaging with the C-suite? Do we need more of that in the standards? Or is that a separate issue?
Again, what I hope came through in the presentation is that I'm challenging the traditional roles of different people. I'm challenging the role of the board of directors. I'm saying that they have to direct. A person put onto a board, and I'm being very generic now, please excuse me, are there because they got experience, because they have a network, because they can help and support. Are they curious? Are they able to look into the future and challenge what the future could look like? Are they challenging you, really challenging you? And I think there I don't see COSO and ISO helping that process. And I've just used the same word, you used the same word as well, the process of risk management. If you look simply in the dictionary, you'll find that a process does not give results. A process is just the framework around the, or to put into place, a process. It does not generate the results. It's the system that generates the results. Therefore, what we need to have, what every company needs to have, is a system. It's not reporting. Yeah, it's we need to have results. We need to have responsibility. We need to move forwards. And one KPI which I've used for a number of years and which other people are also using is, for example, if you have your normal register or your normal risks that you have on your report every month or whatever, or every quarter, how many of them because they are the risks of the next 12 months or the next 2 years, how many of them have happened? If they have not happened, then I would challenge you that they are the wrong risks. They are the wrong opportunities. Yeah, because if you have a 50%, 60%, 70% chance of it occurring in the next 12 months, then one of them must have. And I very often hear, no, I've never had any of those risks occur. Therefore, I challenge, are you choosing the right ones? Okay.
And Adrian, this is a question from me. You used a fantastic phrase earlier in risk fellowship and partnership. How is that different to, I suppose, the formalized risk management associations whose aims are to bring together a risk management community to share knowledge? What do we mean by risk fellowship?
Okay, this was coming from being a risk manager in a large company. Certainly at the top of the corporate level, a lot of facilities, a lot of people, a lot of plant managers feel it's corporate, they want this stuff, we do it anyway, so I don't know what value they're adding, and it's top down. If you visit a plant, you'll be there for 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days, and then you'll leave. So fine. It's compliance, it's reporting, it's not adding value to a plant manager at the shop floor level. So you need to, as a risk manager, we need to, and that's something we need to do in the future, and we should be doing it now, but it's quite challenging. We need a pull from the plants. Okay, so if and I'll be honest, the last, so 2 years ago, I had my budget cut. I told a number of plants, I'm sorry, but my budget has been cut. I'm not going to be able to help you as much in the future. And then they turned around and said, okay, we'll pay. Okay, we will give you money to come to visit us. We'll pay your flight, we'll pay your hotel. We need that information, that insight, that support, that facilitation. That to me is fellowship. It means you are both providing information, you are both providing solutions, you are advising each other, you are being able to attract other people, so the board understand, the C-suite are understanding. There is an interaction across all in a matrix type organization. There are not only the vertical but also the horizontal interactions, and the infinity loop. So the slide that I showed earlier is a continuous process. This loop has everyone interacting and going in the same direction. We are transparent. I've had so many times from the industrial controllers and from the financial people, we can't give that information to the operations because it's confidential. Yeah, but if the operations don't know where to spend their money, then they're going to spend it where they think, and they don't have that big picture view. So there has to be a system in place rather than a process. There has to be a pull from the plants, as well as guidance and a push from the top. There has to be very clear understanding why we are doing this, and are we doing it so that because we're on the stock market? Yeah, is it part of my risk factors for the SEC, the 20F reporting, or why am I doing this? And it's for the long-term sustainability of the stakeholders, so the board, the vision that the board should be giving, but also then helping support the C-suite in achieving, while they are sitting there for their 3-year, 5-year period, whatever, that they can help the board achieve their vision. and the stakeholders, the shareholders will get also the benefit, because the company should be increasing its productivity, its value, its overall value in people's eyes. And the value of a company, the valuation of a company has changed totally in the last 20 years from assets, so in the 70s and 80s, to non-tangible image, reputation in today's world. And I think the risk management process needs to, and those guidelines, the ISO, COSO need to embed or encompass this change, this approach much more strongly. I don't say it's not there. I say it needs to be much more transparent, much stronger than it is today.
Great, thank you very much, Adrian. I know we're running slightly over time, but I do have one more question that's come in, which I'm dying to ask. So you mentioned earlier that audit needs to be flexible in order for risk managers to take more opportunity. So how can risk managers and internal auditors work more closely together? Is there perhaps some conflict between these two roles that needs to be addressed?
No, there's not a conflict. But let's again, from my personal experience, so we had risk-based auditing, and of course this meant that risks were identified. They were then, because it was you had to have compliance, or in my case, we had to have compliance. We spent money, lots of money, mitigating those risks, and at the end of the 12 months, okay, 99% risks have been mitigated, so we're fine. So this has two issues. Number one, I would like the audit community to think about, if I may be so bold, opportunity-based auditing. How can the framework of auditing capture opportunities and enable companies to go beyond their appetites, to go out of control, okay, for a short period of time. So for example, if I go to Mars or I go to the moon, again, to give an extreme example, it's never been done before, so therefore the controls are not in place. The controls will come afterwards. Okay, I can have basic controls and the basic systems which I need to have, and the bow tie, the bow tie approach is very useful for identifying which barriers, which controls are the ones I need to have, but which barriers or which controls do I have to be a little bit more flexible with to be able to grow in the future. That I think needs to be, if we just change that word to opportunity-based auditing, to see what comes out of that. I'm not an audit expert, so, but just as an example, we had in one of our plants a theft issue, and the recommendation was to install a fence around the plant. So okay, we spent $10 million by building a big fence, and the next day there were big holes in it because obviously it was not the right barrier for that problem. And the 10 million would have been better spent somewhere else. So again, that comes back to what I said earlier about prioritizing the recommendations or prioritizing the actions. If you prioritize your actions based upon enterprise value, and you have a consistent system for evaluating based upon actual market conditions, the value created by each action. And you saw from the bridge, the elevator bridge that I was showing, we were able to do that in a value, what we call value plan. If I add all recommendations, whether they're coming from insurance companies, from audit, from internal, from external, it does not matter where they come from, I put them into the system. The system evaluates based upon enterprise value. Then I can complete the actions as necessary, yeah, which is adding the most value, both short-term and long-term. And in fact, some actions will destroy value. They may be good for a plant, but bad for a company. We need to identify that. And so better use of the controlling function, the industrial controllers, and and the awareness that being 90% compliant or 99% compliant with an audit plan doesn't mean that you don't have risk, or doesn't mean that you are doing it in an efficient way. We need a system in place, and that system should involve, and you can see on the slide on the screen, if it's still there, the project and action valuation, step number 5. That is where also the audit actions and plans will be included. We can then visualize what's the overall impact. We start with EBITDA, but in fact it goes on to enterprise value, and then we can do the portfolio. And this is the system that we need to have in many companies. And at the moment, a lot of these are independent silos, unfortunately.
Excellent. Adrian, thank you so much once again for your presentation. We've now come to the end of your session. Our next presentation will be led by Alex Sidorenko, who is the Chief Executive of Risk Academy. This will take place in 10 minutes, 9 AM UK time. I look forward to welcoming you back then.